Welcome to the Seventh Dispensation Podcast. Today we're going to be reading from the book Al Paquan, and we're going to be reading a chapter called The Respite. Now, if you don't know what a respite is when something is in demand, but you give it a Passover, or you give it a chance to keep going before it's over with, or before you have to do whatever you have to do that's in demand to deal with a situation. All right, so we're going to start with the book. Now, the book says, there were 17 centuries of lies and cover-ups surrounding our history before the misidentification of Jesus. The exodus and conquest of the wicked began after Moses went into the hills and caves of Europe to civilize Caucasian people. They were then led by Joshua into what they called the Promised Land. The Promised Land is what they now call the Holy Land. It was formerly known as the Fertile Crescent, which consisted of Egypt, Arabia, and what they now call Palestine. We had control of this land at the time. Joshua commanded his race of devils to annihilate our people and culture. They were told, when you defeat them, then you must utterly destroy them. You shall take no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. Now, the reason why I felt this chapter was important, right, is because a lot of people don't understand the events that transpired throughout our history. Nobody never knew why they hated us so much, right? Like, they hate black people, they hate Indian people, they hate Latinos, and we never knew, like, why they hated us so much, because we didn't even know them. Where we live is so far from Europe that we didn't even know we had any contact or dealings with them for them to hate us so much, and we don't even know them. You know what I'm saying? But when you understand the scriptures and you put the scriptures into its proper context, into its proper perspectives, and then you get to identifying the people in the scriptures, then you see why they hate us so much, because it dates all the way back to the Bible, the scriptures in the Bible. When it's talking about a people going into other people's land, and they fighting those people, and they killing those people, and they stealing their natural resources. If you look at today, right, that's the same thing they still doing today. Like, and they still doing it to, guess who? Us. You see what I'm saying? So now we get a proper understanding of why it's always a conflict between us and them. Because we never knew who they were. Only thing we knew is who they was telling us that we were. And everything they had to say about us been something negative, but we never had nobody come and tell us who they were. You understand what I'm saying? Now let's get back into this book. It says, the conquest involved a gradual incursion of the Caucasian race into our land to occupy areas that were not strongly defended. They were told not to worship our kings, and they were forbidden to enter marriage with us. There were years of conflict and fierce, bloody battles which led to the occupation of our land, in which they renamed Canaan. This is why they came up with the myth that we were cursed due to Ham's transgression upon Noah. But if Ham's descendants were cursed, it would be foolish to place them on the best part of the earth, which is the Fertile Crescent. Ham's descendants were associated with Egypt and Mesopotamia. Their history also includes the legendary founders of Ethiopia, Babylon, Nineveh, and what they now call Palestine. How could a cursed people make and own the best part of the earth? The European conquest is still going on today, right? Now let's look at the stuff that they said about us, and then let's look at the land that we occupied. Let's look at them, and let's look at where they come from, right? So if you say Africa, right? Africa is one of the richest continents on the planet Earth. Like all of the natural resources come from there. The gold, the diamonds come from there. Like the food, the fruit, like everything comes from there, right? It'd be foolish for us to think that a cursed people live on the best part of the planet Earth. And when you come to the Americas, right? When you come to the West, and all throughout the West, right? And you look at the Indian people, and you look at the Latino people who occupy the West, right? And how much value is in the land in the West, right? Because oil come out of the West. You gotta remember, it was even pyramids all throughout the West. See, pyramids didn't just exist in Africa. They had pyramids in Mexico. They had pyramids in South America. They even said that it was pyramids here in America before they showed up. So how could the stuff that they said about our people, right, and try to make it seem like we was the worst type of people and all this, how could we live on the best part of the planet Earth and have all the natural resources, all the riches and everything, and be a cursed people or be like the worst people, right? And then when you look at them and where they come from, I don't know if any of y'all ever been to Europe, but Europe is the worst place to live on earth. You talking about hills and caves and it's like nobody want to live there. It's nothing in Europe that can compete with Africa or the West, where we from. So how could the cursed people live on the best part of the planet Earth, and the so-called holy people, whoever they claim they are, live on the worst part of the planet Earth? And hills and caves. They came out of caves, man. So that don't kind of like add up, you know. Now let's look at the next page. Let's move on. It said, local wars quickly ensued once the devils began spreading lies amongst our people. Jacob taught his people how to divide and conquer. He told them that once they had us fighting amongst each other, to ask if they could make peace, and whatever side agreed they could control that side, and if both sides agreed they could control both sides. Now I'm gonna stop right there for a minute. They still use that today. They call it diplomacy, where they'll go start a war, right? And then they'll ask if they can resolve a war that they started, and if you allow them to resolve the war, they move in and take over your country and your natural resources. Now, the book says that this is something that Jacob taught them back in the day, and that they've been doing for years and years and years. So the book says we still see the effects of this in today's democracy under the guise of diplomacy. Let's say, this is how the devils began to rule as peacemakers when they were the true initiators of the wars. We must create a legal code that punishes any leader who violates our statute of peace. God is here to raise up a king of justice who will promote the welfare of the people. This is how justice will prevail. The law of Moses had its roots in the broad common law of ancient Africa and derived from the African Constitution. That says, the wicked were given a command to subdue the earth and to rule over every living creature, including us. They were given the wisdom of the devil and told that if they applied it properly, they could rule for 6,000 years. But in the 7,000th year, they had to submit to our Lord or be destroyed. So now we're getting into the respite. See, the respite was in the 7,000th year, or on the seventh day, the Lord would come and destroy the wicked's power to rule and set up a justice-founded government. So the respite was, let us continue to rule until the day that they are raised up. And once they raised up, then you could do all the things that you said you was going to do. So that's what the respite all about. Now it says, this was the covenant that they made with their teacher. And this, along with the 10 Commandments, was placed in an ark. They carried the Ark of the Covenant as a symbol of the presence of God. This was the base of Joshua's ministry, and they called their God a man of war and the Lord of host armies, because they were driven by this satanic force. This devil race went throughout Arabia and Palestine, executing man, woman, and child by devoting the spoils of victory as a sacrifice to God. The Caucasian conquest is still portrayed to this day as a holy war. Joshua ordered the entire city of Jericho and its inhabitants to be devoted to the Lord for destruction. Rahab and all those in her house were spared, because she hid the spies of Joshua as they plotted the destruction of her own people. Now, you know, like when you look at Rahab, right, she's supposed to have been like some kind of prostitute who hid the conquerors in her house until they destroyed her people. Like, she was not somebody that you would honor or that you should look at like she did a good job. She betrayed her own people and helped the enemy destroy her own people. Man, that's not somebody worthy of respect. You know, to betray your own people. Now, let's say in the 13th century BC, Ramesses II of Egypt reportedly exiled an entire community of devils out of Egypt. Shalmaneser the first of Assyria recorded that he banished the devils from Urartu to Assyria and exiled another 14,000 from the middle Euphrates region. Egypt is a part of Africa, and the ancient African traditions were centered on the belief in one God, monotheism, as was the life and religion of those throughout Mesopotamia. We have always believed in the submission to the will of God and the building by degrees into a holy and enlightened being. Ramesses II ruled Egypt for 6 decades, and he refused to allow the Caucasian race to dwell in Egypt. The Egyptians were master stone masons and crafters, so it would not have been necessary to enslave a weak and diseased race of people. What was the Ark of the Covenant? The Ark was used to carry the tablets of which inscribed the 10 Commandments and the covenant or technology of Jacob. The Ark was known as the Ark of the Covenant or the Ark of the Testimony. The cover of the Ark represented the throne of God, and it was called the mercy seat. This is where they believed their God dwelled. See, let's focus on this for a minute. They didn't always believe that God dwelled in outer space. They just came up with the theory that it was a God in outer space somewhere. They used to believe that God lived in the Ark of the Covenant that they carried around. They believed that God dwelled in there. They had something that they called the mercy seat. Now let me read this right quick. It says the cover of the ark represented the throne of God, and it was called the mercy seat. This is where they believed that God dwelled. So according to this book, the Alpha Quran, right? The Alpha Quran, which is the holy book and the divine revelation from God, right? It says that they believe that the Ark of Covenant symbolized God's presence. They believe that this is where God dwelled. So, what year did they take God out of the covenant, out of the Ark of the Covenant, and place God in outer space? Because they didn't always believe that God dwelled in outer space. They believed that God dwelled in that Ark of the Covenant that they used to carry around. But somehow, and they had something called the mercy seat, that they believed that this is where God dwelled. So how did God go from the Ark of the Covenant to somewhere in outer space that don't nobody know where yet? That they just call it heaven somewhere and point up. All right, so let's get back into this book. Now the book says this. The Ark of the Covenant symbolized God's presence, and these wicked devils would kill anyone who looked inside. They said to look inside the holy things, even for a moment, meant death. This is what Joshua told Moses, and this command lasted throughout their reign. In fact, Ahio killed Uzzah because he touched the ark. Now listen, this is how serious they was about the Ark of the Covenant. They didn't believe that God dwelled in outer space. They believed that God dwelled in the Ark of the Covenant, right? And there was a guy by the name of Ahio. is A-A-I-O. I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't know if it's Ahio. But it say he killed somebody named Uzzah because he touched the ark. They said they didn't want nobody touching it or nothing. They killed somebody because he touched it. Because they believed that God dwelled in this ark. Now it said the ark was really a filthy old box with mice and ticks. When the people of Palestine captured the ark and took it to the temple of their king Dagon to be opened, a foul odor arose which was so strong that everyone began running out of the temple in such a panic that they knocked over the statue of Dagon and shattered it. Then the people of Ashdod, who had touched the ark and stayed in his presence, became afflicted with tumors. They carried this filthy ark from Ashdod to Gath as far as Ekron, causing everyone to become sick. The scientists examined the people and realized that the tumors were the result of the bubonic plague. The people were told that the disease was not a curse from God, but a result of the rodents that were inside of the ark. The Palestinians returned the ark, bearing 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice. Now, there are pictures of the ark in museums, right, in the East, where they show the ark with the 5 golden tumors and the 5 golden mice. The Israelis got a picture of that ark. There's pictures throughout Africa of that ark, and I believe that there are pictures in Europe of that ark with the 5 golden tumors and the 5 golden mice. We just never knew what those emblems or symbols represented until this book. Because now this book comes and it explains where the golden mice and the golden tumors come from and what it represented. It actually represented that when they opened up the ark, the stench was so strong that people became sick. And people who touched it, they had tumors. And it was rodents in the ark that came climbing out. That's what the golden tumors and golden mice represent. That still exists in museums today. That you can see that they got pictures of that in museums today. Now the ark was taken to Beth Shemesh, where 70 men died from disease as a result of opening the chest to look inside. The chest was so filthy that the smell could kill you alone. David brought this filthy ark to Sebed Edom to have it cleaned out, and it took 30 exterminators 3 months to clean this ark before it was finally given back to David and taken to Jerusalem, where it was installed in a tent. When Solomon built his temple, he had the ark moved there from the Babylonians. Moved there, but the Babylonians destroyed the temple and the ark. This is why the ark doesn't exist today, the Ark of the Covenant. Because the Ark of the Covenant was destroyed and the temple that it was in. They said that when the Babylonians burned that ark, it let out a cloud of black smoke and a stench which could be smelled for a mile away. The so-called Israelites believed that their God dwelled in that ark. Now, see, I want y'all to understand that this is where they said God dwelled before they put God in heaven. Before they start pointing up in the sky and saying God was in the sky, they used to say that God was in that ark before it got destroyed. Now listen, the Fertile Crescent extends from the northern end of the Persian Gulf to the valley of the Nile River in Egypt. The Fertile Crescent consists of Egypt, Arabia, and what they now call Palestine. Mesopotamia means between two rivers. This is modern-day Iraq. This is where the earliest known civilizations developed, and this land belonged to us. The land between the Tigris and the Euphrates River is a highly fertile plain, and this is why they were trying to occupy this land still today. Palestine was once part of Africa. Our brothers Jebus, Ariel, and Salem built what is known as Jerusalem. Now let's stop right there for a minute. Let's look at the city known as Jerusalem, right? Jerusalem was built by three guys. One named Jebus, one named Ariel, and one named Salem. Now, I want y'all to remember those names, because later on we're going to talk about who Jebus was, we're going to talk about who Ariel was, and we're going to talk about who Salem was. Because these are the men who built the holy city that they call Jerusalem today. Now it says King Menes ruled in 3100 BC, and crops flourished in the fertile soil along the Nile. The Egyptians built wonderful tombs known as mastubas, which were later replaced by the pyramids. The Old Kingdom started in 2575 BC with the 4th dynasty. It collapsed in 2134 BC and split into separate provinces. The Great Pyramid area was built by King Khufu, also known as Cheops. In 2040 BC, the 11th dynasty king Mentuhotep II reunited Egypt. The capital was in Thebes, and later a new royal capital was built at El Lisht. Egypt is in Africa, and the tomb paintings in Nubia show that we were a united African nation. The Nubians were also a part of the Egyptian army. The Nigerians, Nubians, and the people of the Sahara were one people. Archaeological evidence in Ghana showed that the people of West Africa were all under one banner with the people of the South, East, and North Africa. We are the lost tribe of Timon, the descendants of Esau. And even before we went into Africa, we were a nation submissive to the will of God. We have always been righteous, even before the Arabs believed in God. In fact, their revelation came from Africa. The African people have always been one people with the people of Palestine, Syria, and all the lands west of the Euphrates River. We are human beings, and humanity is our true religion. This is why God proceeds to come from Timon. God proceeds to come from Timon. Now, who is Timon? Let me ask y'all that. Do anybody know who Timon is? Timon is actually the grandson of Esau. I mean, just think of that. Timon is the grandson of Esau. So if they say that Esau was denied his birthright and it was given to Jacob, right? But they say God proceeds to come from Timon, who is the grandson of Esau. So if the bloodline, see, this is a bloodline we're looking at, and the bloodline produces the gods. God proceeds to come from Timon. God proceeds to come from this bloodline, Esau bloodline, not Jacob. And this is why the God that they believe in is in outer space. This is why they believed in a God who they said dwelled in an ark. See, we never believed in nothing like that. We have always believed that we was one with God. We have always believed that we were the people of God. We never looked in outer space for God. We never looked in no ark for God. You know what I'm saying? We believe that God was within us. Now let me read this. This is going to be the last page, and then I'm going to end it for the day. Now it says, the African people have always been one people with the people of Palestine, Syria, and all the lands west of the Euphrates River. We are human beings, and humanity is our true religion. This is why God proceeds to come from Timon. Beginning around 1200 BC, a lot of civil wars took place in Africa as a result of the presence of the Caucasian race. Some of the most notable was the defeat of the devils by Ramesses III. Then there was the civil war of 1100 BC with both Libya and Nubia taking part. Libyans and Nubians fought hard to keep the devil race out of Africa, but the devils had become too powerful, and in 671 BC, they invaded the continent. However, in 1000 BC, David became king of Judah. Palestine had been conquered approximately 100 years earlier. This is why the devils had such a strong presence in the east. They were stationed in the center of Arabia and Africa. David conquered Jebus, and it later became known as Jerusalem. Now listen, Jerusalem was originally called Jebus, and it was built by 3 black men, Jebus, Ariel, and Salem. These are the builders of this holy city. Black men. And it was named after Jebus, one of the builders of it. But it was conquered by somebody named David, a Caucasian, and it later became known as Jerusalem. And we're going to finish this book up next week. I'm going to end for now. So next week we're on page 178. 178. And we'll finish it up. Now this is a big old chapter, so it's going to take a minute to finish this up. And then we didn't really even get into the commentation too much. I didn't really break down a lot. But what I want y'all to do is research the things that I'm saying. And then that way you can learn with me. And research things. Look up Jebus, Ariel, and Salem, the builders of the holy city Jerusalem. And find out who these 3 men were so you can know who are the real owners of the holy city Jerusalem. And on that note, I leave y'all as I came. Peace.